The story begins with an extreme gamer named Alan, who's just finished a game that took him a grueling 3 years to complete. But instead of feeling accomplished, he's left disappointed because the whole thing was a letdown. Despite all the time and effort he poured into it, the game never truly challenged him. And what Alan really wants is something that'll push him to the brink. A game so relentlessly difficult it'd take a whole decade just to beat. He's craving a real test, not something you can brute force with enough patience. With that in mind, he jumps straight into the search for his next big challenge. And that's when he stumbles across a mysterious title that claims to never end. Under normal circumstances, a game installing itself on his computer without permission would be a huge red flag. But he's already completely hooked and doesn't bother backing out. Instead, he dives straight into the settings menu to tweak the difficulty. Wanting the experience to be as punishing as possible, he cranks the difficulty all the way up to hell mode and chooses the untested summoner class just to make things even more chaotic. Without reading a thing, he accepts every term and condition. Unfortunately for him, one of those clauses mentions transporting the player to another world, and before he can process it, Alan finds himself reborn as a newborn baby in the middle of the countryside. A full year passes, and life as a baby turns out to be way better than Alan expected. He doesn't have to work, worry about money, or deal with responsibilities, and on top of that, the milk is more than unbelievable, and he has kind and loving parents who take good care of him. His father is named Rodden, and his mother is Therja, and they seem like a genuinely happy couple. Still, setting the game to hell mode makes it feel like a classic, tragic backstory family situation waiting to happen. One night, after being put to bed, Alan raises his tiny arms and starts muttering every command phrase he knows, desperately trying to bring up a status screen. After all, even though he's supposed to be a summoner, he has no clue how summoning is actually supposed to work. Just before giving up and falling asleep, he decides to try one last time. And this time, something really does appear. Unfortunately, it scares Alan so badly that he starts screaming, causing his parents to rush into the room as soon as they hear him. With no choice, he hides the book for the moment. After checking on him and making sure everything is fine, his parents leave the room. The second they're gone, Alan pulls the book back out. Relief washes over him as he finally gets to see his stats after an entire year of trying, and they look about right for a 1-year-old summoner. All of his summoning skills are stuck at the lowest tier, but the book explains that they'll improve the more he uses them. So Alan decides to test it out right away, and from what he can tell, he's currently limited to summoning H-rank insects and beasts, which sounds ridiculously weak, so he's not expecting anything impressive at all. Right then, the book suddenly flips to the message section, and Alan realizes he's received a letter from the world's god of creation. The deity apologizes for how long it took to finish Alan's status book, explaining that the summoner class was still being developed, and it ended up taking an entire year to clear all the required approvals. Alan couldn't care less about the apology, but hearing that the summoner class was rushed at the last minute gets him excited. If it was pushed out in a hurry, then there are definitely bugs left behind for him to mess with. Fired up, he decides to test it immediately. He wants to start by summoning an insect, but he quickly runs into a problem when he realizes he has no idea how to actually activate his summoning ability. Normally, he would just check a subreddit or watch a quick tutorial, but there's no internet here, so he's stuck figuring it out by himself. After thinking it over for a few minutes, Alan finally figures out that he needs to create an insect skill card first. He gives it a shot, and it works without any issues. Now he's finally ready to summon his insect. But before he can do anything, his mother comes in to check on him again. With no other choice, Alan quickly pretends to be asleep once more. The following day, after his parents get busy with their usual work, Alan opens his grimoire and finally summons the grasshopper. The room floods with bright light, and at first he's completely taken in by how beautiful it looks. That feeling lasts about a second, until a massive grasshopper flies straight into his face and he completely freaks out. After calming down, he realizes this is actually the grasshopper he summoned, so he tries giving it commands. Unfortunately, even though it's a summon, it still has the brain of a grasshopper and doesn't understand a single word he says. But on the plus side, Alan discovers that summoning it boosts his agility and endurance stats, which makes him pretty happy. Sadly, his excitement catches his mother's attention, and when she sees the giant grasshopper on the floor, she instantly squashes it, leaving Alan completely devastated. During the next few days, Alan keeps experimenting with his insect summoning, but eventually he gets bored of it and decides to move on to beast summoning instead. This time, he summons a mouse, and just like before, the book launches it straight at his face, but luckily Alan was ready for it, so it doesn't scare him as much. The mouse also comes with its own stat boosts, but it's still not very smart, so having a real conversation is impossible. That said, one of its skills is called Scurry, and whenever Alan orders it to use that ability, it does so every single time. But even so, the skill itself is pretty damn useless, so Alan quickly realizes that if he wants to summon stronger and more useful creatures, he'll need to level up his summoning abilities first. Alan's grimoire reveals that he can store up to 10 summoning cards at a time, and better yet, the stat buffs from each summon stack together. So if he loads up 10 mouse cards, that's a plus 10 boost to both attack and HP. That alone already puts him well beyond your average baby. But to really break the system and go full overpowered, he's gonna need to start leveling up fast. Normally, that wouldn't be such a pain, but the genius Alan chose Hell Mode because he thought the extra difficulty would be fun. Now, gaining experience takes 100 times longer than usual, which means he's officially locked himself into a hellish grindfest. Later that day, Rodden stumbles back into the house, drenched in blood, but thankfully, none of it is his. He just helped the village guys bring down a giant boar. Alan's eyes light up with curiosity, so Rodden offers to take him to see it. Without hesitation, Alan climbs onto his dad's shoulders and they head off toward the hunting grounds. For Alan, this is the first time he's ever gotten to see the world beyond their home, and he's absolutely soaking in the new scenery. But the trip takes longer than he expected, and eventually, he dozes off in Rodden's arms. When they finally reach the boar's body, Rodden gently wakes him up. Alan blinks a few times, then freezes. This boar is enormous. He can't even begin to imagine how his dad managed to help kill something that huge. Not long after, the nearby villagers notice Rodden's return and erupt into cheers, hailing him as the hero of the day. Alan turns to ask if the great boar is really that strong, and Gerda explains that it's classified as a C-rank monster. Normally, it takes around 20 hunters to bring one down, so yeah, they're a pretty big deal. That little detail sticks with Alan because now he has a solid benchmark for measuring monster strength. But before he even dreams of summoning something on that level, he knows one thing for sure. He's got to buckle down and start grinding XP like crazy. After 10 relentless months of grinding, Alan finally hits level 2 as a summoner, and with it comes a pretty solid upgrade. His stats get a general boost across the board, and more importantly, he unlocks the ability to summon and fuse G-rank monsters. Hype as that is, there's a catch. Fusion costs a hefty chunk of MP, so Alan wolfs down dinner to refill some mana and rushes back to his room, only to be hit with disappointment again. His grimoire lets him know loud and clear that his max MP still isn't high enough to even attempt a fusion, so back to the grind it is. Fast forward to when Alan turns 3, and he finally gets his MP stat to a high enough level to try out his new skill. He opens the fusion section and manages to create his very first G-rank summon, a bird, which he proudly names Chappie. Chappie's main ability is Voice Mimic, which lets it flawlessly copy any voice it hears, perfect for setting traps or messing with enemies. Alan also adds a frog and a mole to his squad, and the frog is pretty useless because all it does is jump up and flash like a living distraction. But the mole is way more useful because it can tear a massive hole in the ground in seconds. Compared to the H-rank summons, these new ones are way more useful, and for the first time, Alan actually feels like he's playing a proper game instead of just grinding in baby mode hell. Still, he's nowhere near strong enough to take on real threats yet. Around this time, Gerda's daughter Krina shows up looking to hang out. Her version of playing involves sparring, and unfortunately for Alan, she's absurdly strong. He even maxes out all his summon buffs to stand a chance, but she still wipes the floor with him like it's nothing, meaning the girl's on another level. By the end of the day, Alan and Krina head home, and there's a surprise waiting for him. Derja is pregnant again. Looks like while Alan was off grinding levels, Rodden and Derja were busy leveling up the family. With Derja now unable to do heavy work, Alan offers to help out with the harvest. After all, with his summon buffs, his physical stats are basically on par with an adult's now. But his parents immediately shoot that down. They tell him he should just stick to small chores and enjoy being a kid for now. Rodden reminds him that real responsibilities will come soon enough, so he should enjoy the peace while it lasts. Alan feels a little let down at first after being told he can't help with the harvest. But then it hits him. Farm work is absolutely brutal. No sane parent would expect their 3-year-old to be out there doing backbreaking labor. Understanding that, he backs off and lets it go. Rodden's relieved to see his son being mature about it, and things settle down, until Derja brings up something odd she noticed. She says she saw Alan in the backyard earlier, throwing rocks at a tree. Curious, she asks what he was up to. Alan brushes it off, claiming it was just self-defense training in case a monster shows up. But truthfully, he was running an experiment, testing whether he could unlock skills outside of summoning just by repeating basic actions, but sadly, that attempt didn't get him anywhere. Rodden, however, is still impressed with Alan's dedication and says he's looking forward to his appraisal ceremony. Alan's never heard of that before, so he asks what it is. Rodden explains that when a child turns 5, they undergo an appraisal to reveal any hidden talents or skills they might possess. And if Alan ends up with a powerful one, he could have a shot at living a wealthy and successful life. As winter arrives, Alan continues experimenting and decides to test how durable his summons are by summoning a grasshopper out in the snow. To his surprise, it manages to survive out there for an entire day, which he considers a win. But that little win quickly turns into a disaster when Krina pops up again, eager for another sparring match. As usual, Alan gets stomped, but while he's busy fighting her off, he totally forgets about his summon. That's when things take a turn. The grasshopper, still active, ends up crawling up Derja's leg, scaring the hell out of her. She trips and falls, dangerous enough on its own, but especially risky since she's pregnant. Rodden rushes over, and though Derja says she's okay, it's clear the fall triggered labor. Whether they're ready or not, the baby's coming now. Rodden quickly tells Krina to go fetch her mom, and once she arrives, she helps Derja through a rushed delivery. By sunrise, the family welcomes a brand new baby boy into the world. Everyone is filled with joy, except Alan, who's left feeling conflicted. He still doesn't understand why a game reincarnated him into this world in the first place. But when he thinks back to his old life in Japan, he realizes there wasn't really much waiting for him there. This new life, unexpected as it is, has given him something far more important. That's why he makes up his mind to keep pushing forward, not just for himself, but to protect the only real family he's ever had. By the time spring rolls around, Alan knows his appraisal ceremony is coming up, so he asks his dad what it's actually like. His father explains that every kid has to go through it once they hit 5 years old, and if Alan ends up with a rare or high-ranking skill, he might just land a shot at the elite path. That said, it's not going to be easy. Competition's pretty fierce this year. A whole bunch of kids are turning 5 at the same time, including Krina. They all make their way to the commoner district where the ceremony is being held. But as they get closer to the church, Alan starts noticing something weird. Most of the other kids look super polished and dressed up, while he's stuck in borderline tatters. Now that he's paying attention, he realizes he's been dressed like this since birth. If that's any indication, his family must be seriously low on the social ladder. Still, it doesn't really bother him much. When they reach the church, everyone gathers outside in front of it. A couple of priests step out, and Alan hears folks in the crowd mocking some of the poorer families. The priests aren't having it though. They shut that talk down fast, reminding everyone that divine blessings don't discriminate. Even a broke farmer's kid could be handed a legendary skill. With that, they usher the crowd inside for the actual ceremony. As Alan steps in, he notices 3 towering statues near the altar. They must represent the deities worshipped in this world. One of them is Elmia, the deity of creation. Come to think of it, Elmia is the same one who sent him that apology message about the delay in developing the summoner class. First up for appraisal is Palomas, the village chief's son. He's told to place his hand on the glowing crystal sphere to reveal his stats. Palomas obeys, and a moment later, the stone wall lights up, displaying his class as a merchant. His father looks pleased with the result, but Alan, on the other hand, was kind of expecting something more dramatic. It's basically the same function as his grimoire, except this version uses letter grades instead of numbers. The process continues, as some kids walk away with impressive talents, while others don't get anything worth mentioning. A few hours pass, and now only 2 are left, Alan and Krina. Krina's turn is up, and she practically sprints over to the crystal with excitement. The second she touches it, the whole thing erupts in a blinding white glow. Her father panics for a second, thinking maybe something's gone wrong, but the priests are just frozen in shock. Turns out, the reading is legit, and Krina just unlocked the Sword Lord class, one of the most powerful titles out there. Her dad is over the moon, but Krina herself doesn't seem to grasp just how big of a deal this is. Alan isn't all that shocked by the announcement because he's been getting his ass handed to him by Krina for years now, so it kind of checks out. But now it's his turn, and the priest tells him to step up to the altar. When he lays his hand on the crystal ball, nothing happens at first, but then there's a sudden flash of light, and the damn thing blasts him backward. Rodden rushes over, making sure Alan's okay, then turns to the priest and asks what talent his son got, since reading isn't exactly his strong suit. Based on how strong the crystal reacted, he's expecting something insane, but instead the priest says that Alan has 0 talent. Alan's stunned. No way, that's right. He knows for damn sure he's got a skill, but when he looks up at the board it confirms it. Every single stat is locked at E rank. He's convinced this whole mess is Elmia's fault for completely botching the summoner class code. Before he can spiral too hard, Rodden wraps his arms around him from behind, trying to soften the blow. He doesn't want Alan to feel crushed about not having a talent. They head home together after that, and despite what happened, nobody treats him any differently. Alan really does appreciate how his family supports him, but deep down, he knows the whole no talent thing is bullshit. His grimoire still works like normal, so he figures the E ranks have more to do with the fact that he's stuck playing on hell mode. All the other kids are the same age as him and probably got evaluated based on their leveling potential. But in Alan's case, since it takes him literally 100 times more XP to gain a level, it makes sense that his stats are stuck in the gutter, even if his real strength is way higher than the board shows. Most folks would have lost their minds over something like this, but Alan isn't some casual noob playing for fun. He lives for the brutal grind. Still, he can't shake the feeling that something's seriously off with the summoner class, especially since he saw some sketchy error code pop up at the bottom of his appraisal. He's already planning to file a mountain of complaints to the dev team over it. The following day, Alan tags along with his family to visit Krina's place. But on the way, he starts picking up on something odd. His dad's been acting off. Over at Krina's house, everyone's in the mood to party and celebrate her becoming a sword lord. But Rodden still looks like he's chewing on a lemon. Gerda flat out refuses to join the celebration until Rodden quits the attitude. At first, Alan thinks maybe his dad's just bitter that Krina got something special. But that's not like him at all. Rodden's not that petty, so whatever's eating at him, it has to be something deeper. The two of them keep going at it for another minute until Gerda finally blurts out that Rodden mentioned cutting ties between their families right before they sat down. Rodden stands by what he said, explaining that now that Krina's a sword lord, she's got a damn near guaranteed way out of this tiny backwater town. If things go well, she might even rise to nobility. And if that happens, staying connected to a broke family like Rodden's could just drag her down. Gerda fires back, shouting that he doesn't give a damn about status or any of that crap. But Rodden keeps pushing, saying he's only doing what's best for Krina. The argument heats up again, but their wives eventually step in and pull them apart before it gets worse. Alan's kind of thrown off by how chill everyone seems about the fight, so he quietly asks Gerda's wife if this kind of thing happens often. She just laughs and says yeah, it used to happen all the time, but they always made up after. Turns out, the four of them have been close since they were kids, born and raised in the same village. About 10 years back, when word first got out about building a new settlement, they all jumped in together and helped lay the foundations. Gerda and Rodden bonded a ton during that time. Thinking back on it all makes them realize how dumb this argument really is. Not long after, a message comes in that the Night Order has taken an interest in Krina, and they're on their way over. Alan figures the news about her Sword Lord class must have spread like wildfire. It's a good thing, of course, as she's finally getting the recognition she deserves. But Gerda still seems a little uneasy because she's way too young to be signing up for knighthood just yet. Then out of nowhere, one of the kids from the appraisal ceremony, the kind who got a decent talent, decides to mouth off. He walks up to Alan and tells him he doesn't belong here, calling him a talentless reject, but Alan couldn't care less. He's still got his summoner powers, so this loser's opinion doesn't mean squat. But Krina isn't having it. No one talks trash about her best friend. She steps up and tells the punk to back off, nearly lops off his damn finger in the process, before Gerda quickly steps in and drags her away. Right after that, the village chief announces that the Night Order has finally arrived. The whole place lights up since nobody here gets to see real knights up close. The chief then calls for Gerda and Krina to come meet the knight captain. Krina's practically shaking with excitement, since she's always dreamed of becoming a knight. So meeting the captain in person is like the ultimate wish for her. Alan starts wondering if the knights are planning to take Krina back to the capital for training. But before the knight captain can say anything, Gerda jumps in, saying he can't allow it since she's still just a kid. The captain shrugs it off, saying age doesn't matter. If she's really a sword lord, then she should be more than capable of handling the training. There's no issue, unless of course they made the whole thing up and lied about her being a sword lord just to deceive the Night Order. Gerda quickly denies it, swearing he's telling the truth, but it's already too late. The captain made up his mind, and he orders his vice captain to test Krina in a duel right here, right now, and without hesitating for even a second, the man agrees. Gerda then pleads with the captain to rethink this. He doesn't want his daughter's life on the line over some test, but the captain makes it crystal clear that if Krina refuses to fight, that alone will count as proof that she's a fraud. And if that's the case, not just her, but her entire family will be put to death. One of the knights then hands her a sword. Any normal 5-year-old would have been shaking in their boots by now, but not Krina. The moment she realizes she gets to wield a real weapon, she accepts the duel without hesitation. The crowd clears, and the duel begins. Leibrand steps forward to face her, and Krina doesn't waste a second and charges in at full speed. And from one look, she's swinging a sword twice her size like it's made of paper, and she's actually managing to keep up with Leibrand, forcing him to stay on guard, but he's still handling her without too much trouble. The knight captain watches with a cold stare, clearly not impressed by what he's seen so far. But then Krina blocks one of Leibrand's attacks cleanly and gets ready to counter. Before she can strike though, Leibrand slams his foot into her and sends her flying across the street, crashing straight into a wall. Gerda loses it. The second he sees his daughter tossed like that, he tries to rush in, but the knights slam him down and pin him to the ground. Alan and Rodden try to help, but they get pushed down too. Alan can't believe what he's seeing. This isn't right. Whether Krina is a sword lord or not, she's still a kid, and the guy she's fighting is a grown-ass knight with years of battle experience. But just then, something changes. Krina starts getting back up, and the air around her shifts. There's this heavy, dangerous pressure rolling off her, and she's not saying a word. Just standing there, radiating pure menace. Without wasting a breath, Krina charges in with another full-force assault, locked in like a heat-seeking missile. This time, Leibrand doesn't stand a chance. She absolutely steamrolls him, shattering his sword clean in half and nearly lopping off his damn head. Krina looks a little let down that the match ended so fast, but she clearly enjoyed herself. She casually thanks Leibrand for the warm-up and strolls off, leaving the poor guy with nothing but the crushing fact that he just got wrecked by a 5-year-old. Gerda exhales hard, grateful that his daughter made it out in one piece, and starts showering her with praise for how well she fought. But before he can even process what just happened, the knight captain steps in, and Gerda instantly goes on guard, not wanting that man anywhere near his daughter. This time, the captain drops the arrogance and admits Krina really is a sword lord. He even apologizes for dragging her into the duel. He says he wants to have a proper conversation about her future, but Gerda instantly shuts him down. The captain then offers to let him bring backup to the meeting if that'll help. And after a moment of hesitation, Gerda agrees, only because it makes him feel a bit more secure. They all head to the chief's house for lunch, where Xenoph properly apologizes for the stunt he pulled earlier. He explains that he was ordered by the Baron to verify if a genuine sword lord existed in this village, and after what he just witnessed, there's no denying it. Xenoph then brings up how 3 years ago, a so-called sword saint popped up in a count's household. But that instantly raises red flags for Alan, because in the game system, sword saints are only born from common backgrounds, not noble blood, so that one must have been a total fraud. Turns out that Fake ended up serving the royal family, but couldn't live up to the hype. Once they rechecked him, they realized he was just a regular swordsman faking his rank. And after several nobles were caught bluffing their way up the ranks, the kingdom enforced a zero-tolerance policy on forged talent reports. That said, Xenoph genuinely apologizes again for putting Krina through such a rough ordeal. He reassures Gerda that no one's trying to rip her away from him. Instead, they want her to stay home and keep training as usual. And if she chooses to, once she turns 12, she'll have the option to enter the Knight Academy. After 2 brutal years of grinding non-stop, Alan finally breaks through to the 3rd tier of his grimoire, and he's pumped. This upgrade cranks his summoning game way up. Not only can he supercharge his creatures even more, but now he can control a whopping 30F rank units at once. That's a serious boost to his buff stacking setup. He's dying to test it out, but dinner's already on the table, so he heads back inside. On the home front, life's getting busier. His little brother just hit the 2-year mark, and with their mom pregnant again, there's another baby on the track. While his parents are tossing around baby names, Alan randomly gets a divine message from Elmia, the deity of creation, and ends up blurting the name out loud without thinking. His folks instantly assume he's suggesting they name the baby after a deity, which is totally off limits in this world. Alan can't explain the real reason, so he quickly changes the topic and mentions how Rodden's old scars seem to have faded completely. Rodden casually says it's because he cleared a divine trial earlier that day while wrestling a wild boar. Alan's never heard of that before, so he asks for details, and Rodden explains that sometimes after a tough battle, your body feels totally renewed and your wounds heal instantly. Alan figures it must be what happens when someone levels up in this world. Rodden's a beast of a fighter, so it makes sense if he levels up a lot. Alan, on the other hand, might have a level 3 grimoire, but his body's still stuck at level 1 since he hasn't fought a single monster yet. If he wants to grow stronger, he's got to jump into real combat. That's easier said than done though. He's not allowed to leave the village without permission. The only real way around that rule is by joining a hunting party. But the moment he brings it up, his dad shuts it down right away. He refuses to let Alan risk his life like that. Later that night, when the whole house is asleep, Alan opens his grimoire to check out the message from Elmia. He already has a pretty good guess what it's about. He sent a heated complaint after that appraisal ceremony fiasco. Turns out, Elmia apologizes for the glitch that made him look talentless during the test. It's fixed now, so next time he's appraised, his summoner class should appear properly. The deity also explains that Alan's stats show as E rank because he picked Hell mode, but in reality, he's way stronger than that. And to fix it, they've added a special stats section just for Alan. Alan scans through his updated stat sheet, and to his surprise, it's way better than he expected. He's packing several S and a rank stats, right on par with what Krina had gotten. So he feels like all those long hours of grinding are finally paying off. Satisfied with the results, he moves on to the fun part, testing out his new powers. First up is that enhanced skill. He pulls out a grasshopper card, activates the ability, and watches as the stat boost kicks in. The buff clearly powers up the grasshopper itself, but Alan quickly notices that it doesn't boost the buffs he receives through the summon. Still curious, he decides to call out the creature just to see the changes in real time. And as soon as it spawns, it gives off a faint glow for a few seconds. Definitely looks enhanced. But outside of that, not much else seems different. Before he can dig any deeper, his mom walks in to check on him. And the second she sees the grasshopper, she freaks out and flattens it without hesitation. The following day, Rodden gears up for a hunting trip. And while he's out, Alan slips into the backyard to mess around more with his grimoire. He's been trying every card combo he can think of, hoping to unlock a new summon. He's already burned through most of his viable pairs, and this last combo feels like his final shot. Thankfully, the fusion works this time, and he gets a new card, but it's labeled grass, so he's not sure how useful that'll be. On the upside, it seems to come with an MP buff, which means it might help him increase the number of summons he can use in a day. Curious, Alan summons the grass card, and to his utter confusion, an apple creature pops out. It's not built for combat at all, but it does have a weird skill called aroma. So Alan asks it to show him, and the apple sinks into the ground like a seed, then sprouts a small stem, and sure enough, the stem gives off a sweet, pleasant scent. Just as he's trying to figure out what to make of it, his mom pops up again to check on him. Alan panics and tries to get the apple to hide, but it doesn't respond, so his mom ends up spotting the stem. But thankfully, she just assumes it's a regular plant and walks off without another thought. Still, Alan knows this thing's going to need a whole lot more testing before he figures out what it's actually capable of. Later that day, Alan's back at it, sparring with Krina like usual. But even with all his new buffs from leveling up, he still can't land a solid hit. Her strength's just on another level. Still, Krina notices something. Alan's gotten way tougher. That catches him off guard, so he checks his stats and finds out that his sword mastery has already hit level 3, all thanks to their regular training sessions, and he's pumped to see some real progress. Then he remembers, he recently got a dog summon that has a bite attack, and he's itching to try it out. But using it against Krina wouldn't be fair, so he holds off. After training, Alan spends the rest of the afternoon chucking rocks at a tree in the backyard, hoping to trigger some kind of new skill or awakening. So far, it's a total bust, and he's starting to feel like he's just wasting his time. He hasn't had much of a chance to train outside of this either, since he's been busy taking care of his little brother. Mash, who's been tagging along, eventually complains that he's bored of the whole rock throwing routine. Alan apologizes and promises they'll do something else soon, but he just wants to finish a few more throws. While Alan lines up his last tosses, Mash notices something weird near the house. A bunch of saplings growing where there definitely weren't any yesterday. Turns out, that's the aftermath of Alan spamming his apple summons earlier to farm MP boosts, and it worked. Thanks to stacking the buff, Alan's MP recovery time is now down to 5 hours instead of 6, which means he can push his mana output by over 15% every day. It may not be flashy, but it's progress. As night falls, everyone gathers for dinner like always, but Rodden still hasn't come back from the hunt. That's odd, especially since the group wasn't planning to go deep into the woods today. Derja tries to stay calm, putting on a brave face, but that calm is shattered when the hunters return in a panic, carrying Rodden's unconscious body. One glance is all it takes to see he's in critical condition. He caught a boar's fang straight to the gut, but they managed to cauterize the wound on the way back. and he's barely hanging on. The only reason he's still breathing is the healing herb they gave him during the trip home. They're just stunned to hear that since they're expensive, and she has no idea how they even got one. Gerda explains that after the night captain apologized for how he treated them, he offered a bag of gold coins to make up for it. They used that gold to buy the herb, but it still wasn't enough to fully heal Rodden. Tensions spike as the other hunters start yelling, blaming the entire disaster on the commoners. But then all the shouting wakes Mash, who bursts into tears. So Alan quickly scoops him up and takes him back to bed. The rest of the hunters decide to clear out, leaving the family alone to process everything in peace. Once things finally settle down, Alan quietly asks what really happened, and if it's true that a commoner is the reason for all this. Gerda explains that a few days earlier, he and Rodden were called in by the village chief, who told them that commoners would be joining the next hunt. Boar meat is incredibly valuable, so most of it goes straight to the Baron, but the rest is split between the hunters. Sometimes it gets traded for other supplies, but unless you're out there hunting yourself, getting your hands on any decent boar meat is tough. Even so, none of the commoners had ever joined a hunt before, and with good reason. It's dangerous as hell, so people get hurt, and some even die every year, so naturally, they've always kept their distance. But ever since Rodden's name started spreading like wildfire as some kind of legendary hunter, some of the commoners got the idea that if they tagged along, he'd do all the heavy lifting while they enjoyed the rewards. So they went to the chief and asked to be included in future hunts. Rodden and Gerda were against it, but since it came from the chief, they had no choice but to comply. And just like they feared, it all went downhill fast. During practice, the commoners barely put in any effort, and when the actual hunt began, the second they locked eyes with a real boar, they panicked and dropped their weapons and bolted. Their cowardice shattered the entire formation, and to make matters worse, one of them tripped while running, right in the boar's path. Rodden instinctively rushed in to shield him, and took a tusk to the gut for it. The rest of the group managed to kill the boar eventually, but the damage was done. Gerda promises to bring over Rodden's share of the meat tomorrow, but beyond that, there's not much else he can offer. Alan just sits there, feeling completely useless. All this time, he'd been obsessed with powering himself up, and never once thought about helping the people who actually needed him. By the following day, Rodden finally regains consciousness, and everyone is beyond relieved that he pulled through. But even with Rodden awake, Alan can't shake the weight pressing down on him. Up till now, he'd been treating this like some kind of RPG game, but for everyone else here, this is life. It's real, and it's harsh, and surviving each day takes everything they've got. So the least he can do is use the power he's been given to ease their burden, even a little. Not long after, Gerda shows up again, bringing Rodden's share of the meat just like he promised. He's glad to see Rodden alive, but it's clear from the look on his face that the injury has done real damage. So Rodden won't be able to hunt again, at least not in time to help prepare for winter. Gerda steps up and offers to share from his personal stash to help support Rodden's family while he recovers. Rodden genuinely appreciates the offer. But before anything else can be said, Alan suddenly speaks up. He tells everyone that he wants to take over for his father. His voice is steady, his expression firm, and it's clear to everyone in the room that he means it, so no one argues. And later that day, Alan gets right to work. He heads to the village well and starts hauling water back home. The men nearby warn him to take it easy because hauling that much water isn't something a kid should be doing. But Alan handles it like it's nothing. Up until now, he's been keeping the effects of his boosted stats under wraps, but with all the attention on Krina as the village's rising hero, it's probably okay for him to stand out a little. Once the water's taken care of, he joins Gerda in the fields to harvest potatoes. Gerda shows him how to properly dig them up, expecting Alan to fumble through it. Instead, Alan yanks them from the ground one-handed like it's child's play, and in no time at all, he's filled 3 full baskets. But when he finds out that over half of that will be taken by the Baron as tax, it hits him just how unfair the system really is. He starts thinking about other ways to get more food for his family, until the village chief suddenly shows up. The chief is there to personally apologize to Rodden. He knows the injury happened, at least in part because of the orders he gave. He wants to make amends, and he's also brought the man responsible for the incident to apologize. The guy clearly isn't a bad person, just someone who panicked and made a mistake. So he accepts full responsibility. Rodden tells him he's not angry, but urges him to think ahead next time, and the man nods, promising not to let something like that happen again. Later on, Alan heads back out to the open fields with a plan forming in his head. He clears out a large patch of space and begins summoning a small army of frogs. Each one uses its provoke skill, which should lure out wild animals like ducks, nothing too dangerous. But instead of ducks, Alan ends up attracting a monster bird. For a split second, he considers running, since it's clearly stronger than he expected. But then he thinks of his family, of the food they need, the help they've lost, and decides to take the risk. And with all the stat boosts he's stacked, he figures he might just have a shot. He dashes in and lands a solid blow to the back of the bird's head before it realizes what's going on. Right after, he summons a pack of dogs to swarm it. The dogs do some solid damage, snapping and clawing at the bird from all sides. But it doesn't take long for the creature to recover and start tearing through them one by one. As each summon goes down, Alan's buffs start fading, leaving him more and more vulnerable. And once the last dog is gone, the monster sets its sights on Alan, who suddenly finds himself in serious danger, face to face with a raging enemy and no backup left. As a last resort, he summons a pair of blood-sucking leeches, which latch onto the Albahiron without hesitation, draining its strength with terrifying speed. The creature starts to stagger, weakened just enough for Alan to get a brief moment to plan his next move. He's nowhere near peak condition since 2 of his summons are already gone and most of his buffs have worn off. But he doesn't lose focus because he's already got the perfect finishing move lined up. Alan then resummons his wolves and gives the signal for all of them, leeches included, to strike together. As they close in, Alan bursts forward alongside them, propelling himself straight at the target and driving his sword with pinpoint force into the Albahiron's head. The hit lands with enough power to drop the beast flat and keep it there for good. A moment later, his grimoire lights up with a message saying he's successfully defeated the Albahiron and earned 100 XP. Seeing that notification pumps him up. He can't help but celebrate for a second, thrilled that the plan worked. Once that rush settles, Alan brings the Albahiron back to his family, and both of them are honestly stunned. They never imagined someone they once thought of as a total pushover could solo a dangerous beast like that. Gerda steps in and offers to help with bleeding the Albahiron properly. Once they've tied the body down, he gives Alan a full breakdown on how to cut and portion the meat correctly. He points out which parts are edible, which ones aren't, and explains the proper method for separating the good cuts. Gerda also mentions that monsters carry magic stones inside them, and by law, any stone found in monsters ranked D or above is subject to taxation. That said, Gerda doesn't seem too worried about it. He figures it's not like poor commoners like them would get much use out of a magic stone anyway. Even so, he's convinced they can negotiate a better deal from the chieftain, especially once they explain that it was Alan who actually did the hunting this time, since Rodden was too injured to go himself. The following morning, they head to the chieftain's office, sticking to their plan to use Rodden's injury as leverage. At first, the chieftain pushes back, saying they should only get the smaller portion, but Gerda and Alan keep pressing, reminding him just how serious Rodden's condition is, and how a kid like Alan had to risk his life just to bring food back. Eventually, the chieftain caves and agrees to give them the larger share, exactly as they hoped. He tells them they can keep all the meat, and he'll only be taking the wings and the magic stones for himself. Still, Alan decides to push things a bit further and asks the chieftain if they'd be allowed to keep making the same kind of deal going forward. Gerda jumps in to back him up, doing everything he can to help persuade the chieftain. After thinking it over for a moment, the chieftain finally gives them the green light and agrees to let them continue under the same terms. After 3 days, Alan heads out again and uses the same strategy to take on 2 more Albahiron. Having already taken one down before, he's feeling a lot more confident now, and it shows. With the help of his leeches, his wolves, and that trusty wooden sword of his, Alan manages to bring down both beasts in record time. Since that first successful hunt, he's been going out every 3 days. But this is the first time he's come back without losing a single summon, and he's honestly thrilled with how well it went. Right on cue, his grimoire flashes and confirms the win. 2 Albahiron down, and 200 XP gained. Even better, it tells him he's officially leveled up and reached level 2. Alan practically explodes with excitement and pulls up his stat window immediately. Sure enough, all of his HP and MP have been fully restored thanks to the level up. But as he looks closer, he notices something strange. His stat increase is only about 60% of what it should be. He doesn't overthink it though. Maybe it's just because he just hit level 2 and the boost hasn't fully kicked in yet. Either way, he's still pumped. All that effort is finally paying off. The more he thinks about it, the more he starts to believe that this could be the trial of the deities that Rodden once mentioned. And honestly, that thought makes him feel incredible. Still, he knows that sooner or later, he's going to have to come clean and tell his family the truth. Afterward, Alan returns home, and Rodden's stunned to see him drag back 2 Albahiron in one go. After that, Alan meets up with Krina for a bit of sword training. But even in the middle of sparring, his mind keeps drifting, thinking about when and how he'll take down more albahirone. Since it's migration season and there's an abundance of them around, he figures if he stays consistent, he could hit level 3 by taking out around 20 more. That train of thought gets cut short when Krina suddenly smacks him with a solid hit to the head, clearly ending the match in her favor. Alan then admits defeat, and Krina casually waves him off as she walks away. Afterward at night, Alan decides it's finally time to come clean with his parents about how he's been taking down those albahirone with such ease. But he's well aware he can't just blurt out that he got dragged into some game he found online because his parents would probably think he'd lost his mind. So instead, he crafts a more believable story. He tells them that when he was only a year old, he received an oracle from Elmia, the deity of creation. Alan explains that an oracle is basically a divine blessing that makes someone both smarter and stronger than most people. On top of that, it means he'll be tested with trials that push far beyond what even 100 normal men could endure. Hearing that, Rodden immediately picks up on what's really happening. He already had his suspicions because he noticed that morning that the cut on Alan's face had completely vanished. That alone told him Alan must have already gone through one of the deity's trials. But Derja is still trying to make sense of it all, especially since Alan's appraisal results last year said he had no talent whatsoever. That's when Alan adds another layer to the story. He claims he received a second oracle from Lord Elmia just a few months ago. He explains that his appraisal came out low because the process couldn't account for how slowly his trials would develop. On top of that, he says the system couldn't recognize his talent at the time because it was too new to be properly evaluated. Rodden is floored because it means Alan really does have a talent after all. When he asks what that talent is, Alan says he doesn't actually know. The oracle didn't give him the full answer. It hurts him to lie about it, but he knows he can't tell the truth. Revealing that he's a summoner who can control monsters would freak people out, and there's no way he can say anything about being reborn either. In the end, Derja pulls Alan into a hug, calling him brave and incredible, especially for someone so young to be carrying all this on his shoulders. Rodden then asks what Alan wants to do going forward, and Alan tells him that for now, he just wants to prove he's worthy by completing every trial. Rodden's proud of that answer, but he also reminds Alan not to be afraid to lean on others when things get tough. Alan thanks them both for being so understanding and for backing him no matter what. Rodden finishes by saying that it's probably best to keep all of this under wraps for now. If the wrong people start thinking he's a fake prophet, things could get ugly fast. But the only one they'll let in on the truth is Jirda, since he never stops hyping up Krina as a future sword lord. Rodden figures it's finally his turn to brag about how awesome his own kid is too. By the time winter rolls around, Alan pulls out one of the stored albahirones and begins butchering it piece by piece. Once that's done, he heads into town with Jirda to trade the meat for supplies. Jirda's already caught wind of the big news that Alan is being chosen and tested by Lord Elmia, and honestly, he's not the least bit shocked. He always had a gut feeling there was something different about that kid. As they travel together, the two of them chat along the way. At one point, Alan brings up the topic of the difference between commoners and serfs. Jirda explains that it mostly comes down to status and taxation. Serfs live under a whole different system, where every adult has to cough up 3 gold coins a year, and each child costs 1. Alan listens carefully and then asks what it would take for a serf to rise up and become a commoner. Jirda tells him it'd require a tribute of 10 gold coins per family member. He also mentions there are whispers about a certain baron occasionally granting commoner status as a reward. But those are just rumors, and no one knows if they're true. Hearing all this, Alan quickly does the math. With his mother expecting another child, that would make them a family of 5, meaning they'd need 50 gold coins to earn their way out of serfdom. Alan spends the rest of the day working trades with Jirda and slowly starts to get a solid feel for how the barter system works. By the time they head back, he's carrying a fat bundle of firewood on his back. Realizing he now has a decent grasp on how town trading operates, he starts thinking about ways to run some market research next time he comes in. When Alan returns to trade on his own, he takes a much more methodical approach. He carefully tracks the barter and market value of every item he sees, recording all of it so he can use that info later. Eventually, he steps into an herbal shop and asks the merchant if there's any kind of medicine that can restore MP. The shopkeeper immediately says no. Those kinds of items are way too pricey for their store to keep in stock. Still, Alan takes his time and scans the shelves full of herbs and medicines. Realizing that documenting all of them by hand would take ages, he focuses hard, and with just his thoughts, his grimoire responds, absorbing the details of every herb in the shop without him having to touch a thing. Following that, Alan asks the shopkeeper if he happens to have any Mueller's flowers in stock. But the merchant's expression instantly shifts, and he gets visibly annoyed the moment Alan mentions that name. He explains that the last time someone asked for one, it turned into a whole mess. Apparently, Gerda stormed into the store, demanding a Mueller's flower because a friend of his was seriously ill. He didn't even pay the full price up front, just promised to settle the rest later. The merchant never got the rest of the payment, and to make things worse, that flower happened to be the last one in stock, so that's what really ticks him off. Hearing all this, Alan quickly pieces it together. Gerda must have rushed in that day to buy the herb that ended up saving Rodden's life after the night he was attacked. If the merchant had flat out refused to sell it, Alan might not even have a father right now. Wanting to show his gratitude, Alan hands over some Albahiron jerky as a thank you gift and sincerely thanks the merchant for his kindness. Then he quietly heads out of the shop. While walking through town, Alan finds himself checking out a few weapon displays when he suddenly bumps into a familiar face. The same kid from the appraisal ceremony with the axe talent, Dagora, and standing beside him is the chieftain's son Pelmoas. Alan knows Dagora's nothing but trouble, so he tries to mind his business and slip away. But Dagora's not having that. He smacks Alan on the head and immediately demands that he become his underling. Alan responds by calmly pulling out his wooden sword and pointing it straight at him. Dagora flinches, calling foul because he doesn't have a weapon. Alan shrugs and tells him he's fine with a fair fight. Dagora can go grab whatever weapon he wants, and Alan will wait. Dagora runs off and returns soon after with a sword, then charges straight at Alan. But Alan dodges with ease, deflecting every swing. Dagora's strikes are heavy, which makes sense for someone with an axe talent, but even with all that muscle, he's got nothing on Krina. Alan decides to end it quickly. He knocks the sword out of Dagora's hand and wins clean. And without saying much, Alan turns and walks away like it was no big deal, which only makes Dagora seethe even more. Later that evening, Alan returns home and sees Rodden unwrapping his bandages. Looks like he's finally healed up and ready to head back into the wild. Derja, however, isn't so thrilled, and she warns him not to overexert himself and risk another injury. The very next day at Krina's place, Dagora shows up again, this time looking for a rematch. But he gets wrecked, and not just once, but over and over again. Still, his pride refuses to let it go, so he keeps demanding more fights, no matter how many times he loses. At the same time, Alan's younger brother Mash has already started sword training with Krina, which gets Alan fired up to see how Mash will turn out during his appraisal ceremony in 2 years. Not long after, the new baby is born, and the family decides to name her Mula. Sometime later, Rodden comes back from a hunt with Gerda and brings some unexpected news. Apparently, the chieftain has summoned their whole family. The chieftain says the Baron now wants them to increase their boar deliveries from 10 to 15. To make that happen, he wants the commoners to be allowed to join the hunt again this year. Derja immediately thinks this demand is insane, especially after what happened to Rodden during the last hunt. Rodden admits he was ready to turn it down until he found out it wasn't a request. It was a direct order from the Baron himself. And if they can't deliver 15 boars by winter, the Empire's going to bring in new serfs from other regions. Alan picks up on the implications right away. More serfs mean less land to go around, and that would put non-hunters at risk of losing their plots. Gerda chimes in and says that's not even the worst part apparently. The Baron expects them to bring in 20 boars by the end of next year. Rodden figures the only way to make that happen is to increase the hunting frequency instead of sticking to their usual schedule of once every 10 days. That's when Alan speaks up and suggests they should just follow the Baron's order. Gerda quickly scolds him for cutting into an adult conversation, but Rodden stops him and lets Alan continue. Alan explains that since it's a direct order from the Baron, refusing isn't an option, and even if the commoners turn out to be dead weight, they'll just have to find a way to make that dead weight useful. Alan says that based on his experience with gains, turning underpowered characters into something valuable is kind of his thing. He tells them to trust him and let him handle it. After all, he was blessed with Elmia's wisdom, and if anyone can come up with a working strategy, it's him. The following morning, Alan and Rodden link up with a group of commoners who'll be joining them on the boar hunt. When they spot Alan, most of them are shocked to see such a young kid tagging along. Rodden quickly explains that they'll all be following his hunting method, and Alan is just there to observe and pick up experience. Alan politely assures everyone that he won't be a burden and bows to show his gratitude for letting him tag along, even though part of him wishes he could be more involved. He knows that the real priority is helping train the newcomers. His focus is on giving them enough field experience so that they can help with future hunts because he doesn't want anyone getting seriously hurt like his dad did during last year's boar incident. One of the men quietly approaches Rodden and apologizes for the injury he caused him the year before. Rodden brushes it off with a smile, telling him not to worry about it. Instead, he reminds the group to keep their eyes on today's hunt and leave the past behind. With that, the forest gate creaks open, and the team starts their approach. As they step into the woods, Alan suddenly realizes that this is the first time in 7 years, since becoming a serf, that he's ever stepped outside the village. It feels like a small but meaningful step forward, so maybe it's the beginning of a path that leads to freeing his family from this life. What thrills him most, though, is the idea of catching a glimpse of the legendary White Dragon Mountains. There's an old tale that a mythical white dragon lives near those peaks, and Alan has always dreamed of seeing it, even from a distance. Not long after the hunt kicks off, everyone splits up into position as a massive wild boar crashes through the underbrush. Right on cue, the bait squad steps in to steer the beast in the right direction. The tank team follows up, holding the boar in place and keeping it from charging or breaking loose. Then, once it's boxed in, the strike team rushes in to finish the job. Alan watches everything unfold with sharp focus, realizing this is the same formation and approach his father and the veterans have been using for over a decade. The coordination, the timing, it's a well-oiled system. And seeing it play out up close, it hits him just how smart and effective it really is. After the boar is finally taken down, the group of commoners can't help but feel a wave of pride rush over them. To them, pulling off a successful hunt like this feels like passing a divine trial. It's proof of their growth and teamwork. Alan figures that, since the boar was classified as a C-rank monster, they probably racked up a solid amount of experience points. Curious, he opens his grimoire to check his own stats. But to his disappointment, he finds that he didn't gain a single point. Thinking it through, he realizes that makes sense. He didn't actually fight, just watched everything from the sidelines. Even so, he feels content seeing the others level up and start to believe in themselves more. Once things settle down, Alan strikes up a casual chat with a few of the villagers. The topic shifts to monster meat, and they start swapping stories about the tastiest creatures they've ever carved up. One of the men, clearly a fan of monster cooking, offers to help Alan butcher any beast he brings in. Alan takes note and quickly decides to take him up on that. He leads the man over to his stash of albohiron and asks if he can handle the butchering. Of course, the guy isn't planning to work for free, so Alan lays out a deal. For every albahon the man processes, Alan will hand over 2 full packs of meat as payment. The offer is surprisingly generous, and the man agrees right away without a second thought. Alan's got a clear reason for this arrangement. He's still hustling to save up 50 gold coins to buy his family out of serfdom. If he hired a pro butcher, it would cost him a small fortune. But with this trade, he gets the job done right without wasting his precious coins. Soon after, the hunt kicks back into gear. This time, they shake things up and decide to break into smaller units instead of sticking together. The new setup lets them cover more ground and bag twice as many boars in half the time. Even so, something keeps nagging at Alan. He still doesn't get why the Baron is pushing so hard to harvest more boars this year than ever before. But orders are orders, and when the Baron speaks, nobody really has the freedom to question it. Out of nowhere, one of the boars charges straight at them. Gerda doesn't waste a second and jumps into action, slamming the beast head-on with a crushing blow that instantly takes it down. He then calls out to the rookie hunters, urging them to step in and finish the job. They do just that, and once again, they're filled with pride for pulling off another successful hunt. The previous time, Alan didn't see any changes to his stats. But this time is a totally different story. He checks his status screen and is hit with a wave of joy because his stats have gone up, and he's officially reached level 3. After thinking it over, he figures out how it happened. The trick was simple, but it worked. As long as one of his summoned creatures makes physical contact with the enemy before it dies, the system counts him as part of the fight. Right before the boar went down, Alan summoned Denka, and the boar ended up stepping on him, making contact. That tiny moment was enough for Alan to earn experience, though it came at a cost. Denka was killed in the process, and as Denka's spirit drifts upward, Alan quietly apologizes. But deep down, he knows it was worth it. After 3 months, Alan and Krina are invited to the chieftain's home to celebrate the new year. After the visit, they head back to their own place to properly enjoy the holiday. The table is packed with food, and Gerda and his wife drop by to join the fun. Everyone digs in, laughing and enjoying the cozy vibe. During the meal, Gerda casually asks Alan if the chieftain had said anything about them. Alan nods and explains that the chief made sure to personally thank them for all their hard work. Rodden had expected that they would easily hit the goal of bringing in 20 boars for the year, just like he'd planned. Alan adds that the chieftain was so pleased with how things were going that he gave him a bottle of liquor as a reward. Alan knows full well how much Rodden and Gerda love their drinks, and how rowdy they get once the alcohol kicks in, so he comes up with a sneaky idea to use it as leverage. He proposes a challenge. If he wins, he gets to officially join the next hunt, weapon in hand, and fight like one of the team. But if Rodden and Gerda win, the bottle's all theirs. As soon as Alan lays out the rules, it hits them that they've already walked straight into his trap. But it's too late to back out now. Their craving for the liquor is stronger than their caution, so they agree to go along with it anyway. They ask what kind of contest he has in mind. Alan, keeping a calm expression, says he wants to settle it with an arm wrestling match. Both Rodden and Gerda are stunned that Alan would even suggest something like that shit. To them, it feels obvious that grown men like themselves would be far stronger than a kid his age. Still, with that bottle on the line, they decide to go for it. But what they don't realize is that Alan came prepared. He's been saving up a few strength-boosting cards just for a moment like this. With those in play, he's sure he can go toe-to-toe with even full-grown men like Rodden and Gerda. Gerda steps up first, confident this'll be over in seconds. At first, he doesn't even take Alan seriously. But once they lock hands and the match begins, Gerda's eyes widen as Alan's got way more power than he expected. The kid holds steady, refusing to give an inch. Gerda fights back hard, straining against the pressure. But Alan digs in and eventually slams his hand down to win the round. Impressed, Alan makes a mental note. Gerda's strength stat is probably somewhere between 150 and 200. Then it's Rodden's turn, and from the start, Alan can tell this isn't going to be as easy. Rodden's strength feels like it's in a whole different league. Even with all his buffs, Alan struggles to keep up. But Rodden doesn't even flinch, and he just slowly but surely forces Alan's arm down and takes the win. Sticking to his word, Alan hands over the liquor. Rodden and Gerda accept it with big grins, and not long after, they're all sharing drinks and laughing together. Even though Alan didn't win the right to join the next hunt, the match wasn't a total loss. He gained something just as valuable, a better understanding of where he stands. Now he knows Gerda's power is likely around D rank, while Rodden is closer to C rank. Rodden then tells him that unless he can beat him in a contest of strength, there's no way he's letting Alan join the boar hunts. But instead of getting discouraged, Alan takes it as motivation. He's more fired up than ever to train harder and prove himself. Not long after, Alan notices something new. His summoner level has gone up again. Eager to see what's changed, he quickly pulls out his grimoire and opens it. As Alan flips through the pages of his grimoire, he's blown away by the number of new abilities that have unlocked. But one skill in particular grabs his full attention. It's the ability to view E-ranked cards anytime he wants. Alan immediately realizes how insanely valuable this is. With constant access to these cards, he's confident his strength will climb faster than ever. In fact, he's already thinking about taking on Rodden again, and this time, he might actually have a shot at winning. But as he continues scanning the pages, something unusual catches his eye. A new page has appeared, one that definitely wasn't there before. He flips to it and finds what looks like a hollow slot carved directly into the paper. After some quick testing, he figures it out. It's a storage ability. He can place items into the grimoire as long as they fit inside the space. Strangely, the interior stretches much deeper than it seems, making the pocket far more useful than its size suggests. What really throws Alan off is that storage magic is considered a divine tier skill, ultra rare and extremely powerful. So why would someone like him suddenly gain access to it now? The timing doesn't feel random. It's almost like someone or something wanted him to receive it at this exact moment. The following day, Alan sets out to test his new E-rank summoning ability. He pulls out a magic stone and activates the skill. The first creature he summons is an insect, a radiant butterfly with dazzling wings that shimmer in the light. It's harmless, but its magical aura is unmistakable. Curious, he summons again. This time, a saber-toothed tiger materializes. Alan instinctively backs up the moment he sees it. With its huge fangs and powerful frame, the beast looks terrifying. But after watching it for a while, Alan realizes it's completely tame and not a threat. Slowly, he gets used to its presence and decides to name it Tama, officially welcoming the tiger as a new member of his growing team. After that, Alan tries to fuse two of his summons together, but quickly runs into a problem. Each fusion consumes a magic stone, and that single discovery changes everything. If he wants to keep evolving his summons and pushing his strength forward, he'll need a constant stockpile of magic stones. and the only way he knows to get them is by killing horned rabbits. At night, Alan brings up the magic stone issue with his father. To his disappointment, Rodden breaks the bad news that horned rabbits won't be showing up anytime soon. A defensive trench was dug around the village not long ago, cutting off the monster's usual routes in. That means Alan's easy source of magic stones has completely dried up. Frustrated, he spends the night mulling over other options. The next morning, while Krina is busy training and handing Dogora another beating, Alan heads over to speak with Palomas. He asks if he knows anything about magic stones. Palomas, being well versed in such things, explains that D and C ranked stones are generally found in the royal capital and are worth a good amount. E ranked stones, on the other hand, are practically worthless and sometimes just lying around. To prove his point, Palomas casually picks one up off the ground and tosses it to Alan before strolling away. That simple gesture lights a fire in Alan's chest. If E-rank stones are that easy to find, then he doesn't need monsters. He can gather them himself. With help from the villagers, Alan starts collecting. Over time, he builds up a solid stash of E-ranked magic stones. Using them, he summons every E-ranked creature available to him. Just as he finishes the last summon, a wild boar suddenly bursts out of the woods, charging straight at him. But his summoned beasts leap into action, reacting instantly and tearing it down in a single strike. Alan barely has time to celebrate before another boar appears, and again one of his summons intercepts and neutralizes the threat without him lifting a finger. Then he blinks, and the entire scene fades, as it was all a vision. He closes his eyes once more, sinking into reflection. 7 long years as a serf, with no mentor, no handbook, just trial, error, and relentless effort. Everything he's learned, he's figured out on his own. And now, it's starting to make sense. Each type of summon has its own purpose. Insect types are ideal for debuffs. Grass types provide healing. Stone types specialize in defense. Bird types excel at scouting. Beast types handle direct combat. Together, they form a complete team, everything a traditional party needs, all controlled by one person. That's the essence of a summoner's true power, and now he finally understands why he was granted a storage skill. It wasn't random. It's there so he can carry the massive supply of magic stones his army will require. And with enough creatures at his disposal, Alan truly believes that a summoner could one day surpass even the Demon Lord's power. Sometime afterward, Gerda, Alan, and Rodden sit in on an early gathering with the chieftain Deboji. During the discussion, the chieftain tells them that the Baron has developed a keen interest in their recent achievements with the boar hunts, and because of that, he intends to visit personally to observe the hunts himself. Gerda's expression tightens the moment he hears this, since it is the very same Baron who first imposed that outrageous quota of boars, and now he plans to show up and watch it all unfold like it is some grand spectacle staged for his amusement. Rodden, on the other hand, does not appear troubled by the Baron's upcoming visit. Instead, he seems puzzled about why Alan was summoned to attend the meeting in the first place. The chieftain clarifies that since the Baron will be coming, he wants Alan to serve as his guide. Alan will oversee showing him around the village, keeping him engaged, and detailing how the hunts are organized and executed. Gerda cannot see why Alan should carry that burden, and he questions why the chieftain does not simply assign his own son Palomas to handle it. The chieftain responds by saying that Palomas is not the ideal candidate for such a duty. He has been told that it was Alan's sharp thinking that fueled the recent triumph in the boar hunts, and for that reason, he considers Alan perfectly suited for the role. He then turns directly to Alan and asks whether he is prepared to accept it. Alan pauses to reflect. He understands that earning the Baron's personal favor means little to him. What truly drives him is liberating his family from serfdom. If he keeps hunting boars the old-fashioned way, it would take a full decade to accumulate enough merit to elevate their standing to commoners. Yet he also recalls that titles and status can sometimes be granted outright by the Baron as a form of reward. So holding on to that slim but real opportunity, Alan agrees to take on the position as the Baron's guide. Several days later, Baron Granville arrives in the settlement accompanied by his daughter Cecile. They are escorted by Zinnoff, and that evening, the chieftain greets them with sincere hospitality, and before long, they all head inside to dine together. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Baron Granville raises the matter of the boar hunt. He offers his apologies to the chieftain for the abrupt and demanding request for so many boars. He admits that he is aware the quota is harsh, but he was compelled to enforce it because the directive came straight from the king. The chieftain replies that he comprehends the circumstances and harbors no ill will over the matter. As the meal begins, everyone remarks on how flavorful the dishes are. Cecile in particular shows genuine curiosity and asks what type of meat they are enjoying. Alan courteously answers that it is albahiron meat from a fresh catch he secured just the previous day. He then uses the moment to formally present himself as the Baron's guide for the duration of the visit and states that it is a true privilege to be of service. The Baron studies Alan's refined behavior and naturally assumes he must be Deboji's son. Deboji promptly corrects that assumption, explaining that Alan is actually Rodden's son, and that Rodden is regarded as one of the most skilled boar hunters in the entire village. The name Rodden instantly clicks in Xenof's mind, and he recalls both the man and his son from their earlier meeting. But the Baron shows no sign of recognition, so he asks if Rodden had once served among the knights. Deboji answers plainly that Rodden and his household are serfs. The moment those words leave his mouth, Cecile's mood shifts. She sharply questions why someone like Alan was even permitted to share the same chamber as them. Baron Granvelle immediately rebukes her, and in a firm tone, he instructs her that she must never address or regard serfs as though they were beasts. Realizing she has overstepped, Cecile lowers her head and offers an apology to her father at once. Even so, the correction does not soften her attitude, and she keeps casting cold glances at Alan. She remains silent, yet her displeasure is written all over her face. Moving past the tension, Xenof focuses on Alan, and remarks that he expects him to clarify how the hunt will unfold the following morning. He notes that capturing 20 boars is an aggressive objective. He further states that if the burden proves too heavy for the serfs, the knights will intervene and assume control. Cecile then declares that she intends to participate in the hunt as well, and says that she wishes to witness a boar up close with her own eyes. Hearing Xenof's comment, Alan understands that Xenof still questions the serf's capability. Keeping his composure, Alan responds that 20 boars are hardly a challenge for them. He confidently assures them that the target will be reached without issue, and tomorrow's hunt will stand as undeniable evidence of their competence. The next morning, they proceed into the forest where the operation is planned. Alan, together with Baron Granvelle and his party, takes a seat atop a tall wooden platform constructed well above the ground, and from that vantage point, they are able to observe everything safely and clearly. Before long, the hunters step forward and ready themselves. A few of them sprint into the trees wearing lightweight gear fashioned from boar horns and hides. The tactic is meant to provoke the animals into revealing themselves. The familiar scent and silhouette trigger a reaction, and one boar bursts out from the woods in a furious charge. The defensive unit reacts instantly. They close in with heavy reinforced shields, forming a tight enclosure that restricts the creature's movement. The beast thrashes and pushes, but it cannot breach the wall. Then the assault team advances. Spears drive in from different directions, striking with deliberate precision and steady control to wear it down. And after several calculated thrusts, Rodden steps in and ends it cleanly, plunging his spear deep into the boar's throat. The Baron observes closely, and his expression clearly shows approval. He openly admits that he never anticipated this level of teamwork and precision from them. But then the atmosphere shifts in an instant, as 2 boars explode out of the tree line at once. Seeing that, Xenof immediately assumes the hunters are about to be overrun, so he tells Lebrand to prepare the knights to step in. Yet before the command can be executed, Alan calmly raises his voice and stops him. He says that the hunters have deliberately drilled for moments exactly like this, so there is no cause for alarm. And just as Alan said, the hunters do not lose their composure. They swiftly split into 2 units and replicate the same tactic with discipline and sharp coordination. Each team encircles a boar, locks it down, and attacks in perfect rhythm. And in a matter of seconds, both beasts are brought down cleanly. Cecile witnesses everything from start to finish, and the sight of blood and raw brutality overwhelms her senses, and she collapses from the shock. Not long after, the 2 boars lie motionless, so Granvelle steps forward and surveys the aftermath. He quietly tallies the count and notes that 3 boars have now been slain in total, meaning 17 remain to reach the required 20. However, Alan gently corrects him and explains that before Granvelle even arrived, they had already hunted 7 boars, so in reality, only 10 remain. Granvelle cannot hide his astonishment, so it becomes clear to him that the villagers possess far greater ability than he originally assumed. He even begins to consider that the knights might not be necessary to complete the task at all. As the hunt progresses, Alan informs Granvelle that he has 2 formal requests. The first is permission to construct additional shield walls to reinforce the hunting grounds. The barriers have already proven their worth, and expanding them would allow the hunters to contain the boars more effectively while minimizing risk. And for his second request, Alan asks for the regulated supply and circulation of liquor among the serfs. Granvelle raises an eyebrow at that. Liquor does not appear to have any direct connection to hunting. Alan lays out his reasoning plainly. With the rising number of boars being taken down, the village now has a surplus of meat. If the villagers continue trading only meat within their own community, its value will inevitably drop. An oversupply without matching demand could destabilize their small economy, but by introducing another commodity like liquor into circulation, trade would diversify. It would provide an alternative medium of exchange and help keep prices steady. And on top of that, liquor would serve another purpose, maintaining the morale of the hunters after exhausting and dangerous days in the forest. Zenoff took a moment to weigh the proposals and ultimately judged them sensible. Granvelle nodded as well, admitting that Alan's reasoning was solid, so he assured him that both requests would be reviewed with approval in mind. He then openly praised Alan's conduct throughout the hunt, pointing out that he had displayed judgment and composure far beyond his age. In Granvelle's eyes, it was obvious that Alan carried remarkable promise for the years ahead. Soon after, it was time for Granvelle and his party to depart. As Cecile climbed onto her horse, she glanced down at Alan and warned him not to let her father's compliments inflate his ego. And with that parting remark, she turned away and rode off beside Sebas the butler. Alan simply stood there watching them disappear down the road. He felt a quiet sense of relief once she was gone and assumed this would likely be the final time their paths ever crossed. But afterward that same day, Alan, Rodden, and Gerda were called forward once more. They knelt respectfully before Granvelle as he spoke to them in a formal tone. He commended their exceptional performance during the hunt and emphasized that their unity and discipline deserved acknowledgement. As a reward for their achievement, he declared that their families would be raised from serf status to that of commoners. When the words reached Alan's ears, he struggled to contain his excitement. For 8 years, he had held on to this hope. Becoming a commoner meant liberty. It meant new doors opening. It meant freedom from the chains that bound him to the restrictions of serf life. He would finally have the right to leave the village and see the wider world. In his heart, he already knew his first destination. The White Dragon Mountains had been calling to him for as long as he could remember. One day, he intended to hunt dragons there, and that ambition had burned quietly inside him for years. Granvelle then shifted to another subject. The king planned to highlight their village as a model for the entire realm. For that reason, he required a detailed account of how the boar hunts had originally come to be. At the mention of this, Rodden's face darkened, so Gerda softly explained that the memory carried painful weight for him and requested permission to speak on his behalf. Granvelle agreed without hesitation, so Gerda began recounting the past. 13 years earlier, nearly 100 serfs from neighboring villages had been relocated to their land. It was part of the Reclamation Decree, a royal order aimed at cultivating unused territory. The settlers labored tirelessly for half a year. They felled trees, tilled the earth, and sowed their first crops. Gradually, their hard work bore fruit. The fields began to thrive, and for the first time, their future appeared bright with possibility. Then everything collapsed in an instant. A gigantic boar stormed out of nowhere and tore straight through the farmland. It trampled the crops they had nurtured for months, reducing the entire harvest to nothing. So all their effort vanished in a single rampage. The blow crushed their spirits, and despair settled over the village. And in that bleak moment, Rodden put forward a daring proposal. Rather than cower in fear of the boars, they would hunt them down. Back then, they possessed no proper weapons or refined equipment. Still, they gathered whatever crude tools they could find and braced themselves. And through unity and sheer resolve, they brought down their very first boar. Once the tale was finished, Granvelle could not understand why Rodden had hesitated to recount it. To him, it sounded like a testament to bravery and grit, something worth taking pride in. Gerda gently clarified that during that initial hunt, one of their companions had lost his life, so the weight of that death had never left Rodden's heart. Gerda admitted he had repeatedly urged Rodden not to shoulder the blame, yet Rodden stubbornly clung to his guilt. Granvelle nodded in understanding and apologized for reopening such a wound. As a gesture of goodwill, he decided to grant Rodden a reward. He invited him to name a wish, promising to fulfill it no matter what it was. The moment Alan heard that, excitement flickered inside him. This felt like an unexpected chance. He figured Rodden might request something modest, perhaps more liquor for the village. Instead, Rodden surprised him. He asked Granvelle to permit Alan to work at the estate. Alan's stomach dropped the second he heard it. That was not the future he had imagined. If he became tied to routine duties at the estate, his ambitions of exploring the world would stall before they even began. Estate work would anchor him in place, delaying every dream he carried. Before Alan could even voice a response, Granvelle told Rodden that Alan's abilities far exceeded that of a mere laborer. Rather than simple estate work, he suggested Alan serve as a personal attendant to the Granvelle family. The role would place him within their household itself, serving them directly. Rodden stood speechless. Such an offer was no small matter. It signified confidence and esteem. Alan would not just be employed there. He would belong to the inner circle of the residents. Cecile's reaction, on the other hand, was far from enthusiastic, and her expression made it obvious she did not approve of the arrangement. Meanwhile, Alan's thoughts spun rapidly as he searched for a way to decline. Freedom mattered to him more than anything, yet when his eyes met his father's, he saw pure pride and happiness shining there. This decision promised stability and advancement for their entire family, so in the end, Alan swallowed his hesitation and agreed to the proposal. The following morning, everything was set in motion for Alan's departure to the Baron's estate. The entire village turned out to send him off. The mood was heavy, especially for his younger brother Mash, and he didn't even try to hold it together, cried openly, and admitted he was going to miss him like hell. His little sister Mula was still too young to grasp what this meant, so she just stood there quietly, watching with wide, calm eyes. Krina felt it too and didn't try to hide that his leaving hit her hard. And as their own way of saying goodbye, they agreed on one last duel, the same way they had settled things countless times before. The villagers formed a wide circle around them, eyes locked on the fight. As the exchange continued, murmurs began spreading through the crowd. Something was different. Alan was gradually taking control. Usually, Krina dominated these matches and came out on top. This time, though, the tide was shifting, and the reason was something Alan had kept secret. He had spent 20 magic stones to create a hawk, and that crafted familiar had sharpened his speed and reflexes dramatically. He moved cleaner, quicker, and more exact than ever, and with that edge, he managed not just to keep up with Krina, but to outpace her. When it ended, Alan stood as the winner. Still, he didn't accept it outright. He called it a draw and told her they would finish it properly next time. Krina smiled at that, clearly eased by his choice of words. Afterward, Dagoro walked up to him without much talk. He simply placed a dagger into Alan's hand as a farewell gift. He didn't say what he was feeling, but it was obvious enough. He avoided looking him in the eye and turned away almost immediately after handing it over. Then there was nothing left but the actual goodbye. The whole village gathered once more as Alan walked beside his parents toward the gates. They reminded him that he was diligent and talented, but warned him not to overwork himself. They told him to lean on others when necessary and to watch over his own well-being. When they reached the entrance, the farewell was short. No dramatic speeches. No drawn-out tears. Everything that mattered was already clear in their faces. Alan then climbed into the Baron's carriage, and as the wheels began rolling and the village started shrinking behind him, he turned for one final look. The houses, the farmland, the familiar silhouettes of people who shaped who he was, all slowly faded into the distance. A tear slipped down his cheek, not just from sorrow, but from release and resolve. He knew this wasn't an ending. It was simply the beginning of something greater. A few days later, Alan steps into his new role as a manservant and makes his way to the Granville estate. And he is instantly taken aback by how massive and stunning the place is. He has never set foot somewhere this refined before, so the whole scene hits him all at once. But his moment of awe doesn't last long because Cecile wastes no time putting him to work, hopping onto his shoulders and treating him like a ladder so she can grab fruit hanging from a tall branch. Alan is seriously irritated and almost shakes her off right then and there. But he forces himself to hold back since his whole family's future rests on him keeping this position, and one wrong move could ruin everything. Once she finally climbs down, she takes a bite of the fruit and instantly pulls a face because it is painfully sour. Right then, an airship glides across the sky above them, and it is the first one Alan has ever seen in person. He is completely stunned since he has only read about airships in books before, so witnessing one with his own eyes fills him with pure excitement and joy. Even though he has barely settled in, he starts to think that working as a manservant might not be as terrible as he once imagined. The following morning, Alan wakes up feeling motivated and ready to handle his responsibilities the right way. He goes downstairs to the servants' quarters, where he is introduced to the head attendant, a relaxed and easygoing man named Rickle. As soon as Alan greets him, Rickle asks how things have been going with Cecile. One glance at Alan's face tells Rickle everything he needs to know. Rickle gives him a sympathetic look and mentions that life would be much simpler if Alan had been assigned as a hall boy instead of a manservant. Still unsure about what separates the two roles, Alan decides to ask him to explain it clearly. Rickle calmly breaks it down, saying that the estate has a clear servant hierarchy divided mainly into senior and junior ranks. Even though manservants fall under the junior category, they are still recognized as part of the household and are involved in family affairs, treated with courtesy and proper respect. Hall boys, however, also belong to the junior rank, but are not regarded as members of the household. They are temporary aides who step in when necessary and do not hold any family standing. Alan is shocked to discover that certain servants are acknowledged as part of the royal household and take part in its internal matters. After hearing all of that, he finally understands why his father had cried with overwhelming happiness. Granvelle did not simply give him employment. He granted him a place within the family itself, offering him recognition and honor that carry real weight and meaning. Not long after, Alan serves breakfast to the royal family, carefully placing every plate and adjusting each detail to make sure everything suits their taste. The First Lady is instantly impressed by how fast Alan has adapted to his role. She never imagined that someone who used to be a serf could carry himself with such flawless etiquette, sharp awareness, and steady accuracy. Granvelle, noticing how hard Alan is working, casually mentions that Alan does not have a talent, and that immediately grabs Cecile's attention. She jumps at the chance to show off, proudly announcing that she possesses the wizard talent, while her brother Mihai holds the swordsman talent. Granvelle quickly scolds her, firmly reminding her that boasting about talents is unacceptable, which makes Cecile awkwardly correct herself. Soon after, one of Granvelle's children, Thomas, starts crying because he also lacks a talent just like Alan. Granvelle gently comforts him, reassuring him that he will still be able to enroll in the Nobles' College in the royal capital. He explains that he himself was born without a talent, which is why he attended the Nobles' College, and it was there that he met their mother and built his family. Hearing this, Thomas does his best to lift his spirits, encouraged by his father's story and steady reassurance. With the tension gone, Alan enjoys having the afternoon free and decides to wander into town to look around. He is instantly amazed by how much bigger and more developed the town is compared to his small village. While exploring, his gaze lands on the Adventurer Guild, and he quickly heads inside to ask about registering as an adventurer. When he tells the receptionist that he is only 8 years old, she calmly informs him that the minimum age requirement is 12 and shakes her head. Refusing to let that crush his ambition, Alan decides that this will not stop him from chasing his monster hunting goals. He walks over to the notice board and begins gathering information about the monsters nearby, studying the postings closely and paying attention to which creatures appear often, including rumors about the legendary White Dragon. As Alan carefully scans the board, an adventurer named Raven walks up and bluntly tells him to leave, insisting that this is no place for a kid to hang around. Alan nearly steps away, but then realizes this is the perfect chance to learn from someone with real field experience. With a few smart questions and subtle tricks, he manages to draw out valuable details about the monsters listed, including their abilities, behavior patterns, and weaknesses. Just as he wraps up, Raven's teammates show up, making it clear that Alan should get going. He leaves with a quiet sense of satisfaction, confident that he has gathered exactly what he needs to move forward with his next objective. The following day, Alan makes his way to the town gates to head outside, but one of the guards stops him before he can pass. Without hesitation, he shows his servant pass, and once the guard recognizes its authority, he immediately steps aside and swings the gate open. After walking a fair distance, Alan realizes with slight frustration that he has not encountered a single monster, so he decides he will have to actively hunt them down. Acting fast, he summons 5 hawks and sends them soaring out to scout the surrounding area for any trace of monsters. Before long, one of the hawks returns, signaling that it has found something. Following the hawk's direction, Alan soon spots a small band of goblins. He wastes no time and summons 5 saber-toothed tigers, which surge forward and tear through the goblins effortlessly. Alan even lands the finishing strike on one of them by throwing a rock, bursting into laughter at his small but satisfying victory. Wiping out the group rewards him with 1000 XP, and he feels thrilled by how smoothly things are going. He then gathers the magic stones left behind and stores them carefully before ordering the hawks to resume their search for more prey. Not long after, the hawks locate another goblin group, and Alan uses the rest of his summons to eliminate them cleanly. One after another, the monsters fall, and by sunset, Alan has accumulated over 16,000 XP. He jumps with excitement, calling it the greatest day off ever since he leveled up twice. Along with the experience points, he gains powerful buffs for his summons and learns more about magic stones and the behavior patterns of D-rank monsters. Even when night falls, he still feels energized and tells the hawks to find another target. But this time the hawks refuse because the darkness makes it impossible to see clearly. And that is when it hits him that he had been depending on the hawks to guide him back. And now he is completely lost in the forest. But after struggling for a while, he finally manages to find his way home. Roughly a month later, he visits one of the blacksmith shops in town to buy iron balls for hunting. He pays 60 silver coins in total, feeling proud that he has already reached level 12 in such a short time. After spending the day walking around town, Alan eventually returns to the estate and finds Sebas waiting for him. Sebas informs him that Granvelle wants to see him. Alan heads to Granvelle's office, where Granvelle praises him for his flawless work as a servant. Yet he also expresses concern about how Alan spends his days off, pointing out that he always leaves at dawn and does not return until nightfall. Alan gets why they're uneasy about it, so he chooses to lay everything out straight. He tells them he's been spending his spare hours tracking and taking down monsters. Hunting is basically in his veins since he's the son of a boar hunter, and that honestly earns Granvelle's respect. He had thought Alan was just wasting his breaks fooling around, so this surprises him in a good way. To make things official, they agree that every piece of meat Alan brings back will be purchased for 1 silver coin. Alan can barely hide his excitement, realizing he can chase what he loves and get paid for it at the same time. After 6 months, Alan is once again deep in the forest, getting ready to clear out more goblins like he always does. Out of nowhere, his hawks dive down toward him, clearly restless and more on edge than usual. The second he senses something's off, Alan bolts in the direction they're guiding him and stumbles upon Raven and his team surrounded by goblins. Raven is already gravely wounded, barely hanging on, while Rita and Milsai struggle to keep the attackers at bay. Alan studies the scene for a moment and figures summoning his creatures in front of them would only create panic, so he decides to handle it himself this time. He and Rita sync up smoothly, striking in rhythm and cutting down the remaining goblins together. For Alan, the fight feels almost too easy now. He has grown far stronger, with both his strength and agility surpassing 300, making D-rank monsters little more than warm-up targets. Once the goblins are down, Raven's condition still looks critical, and Alan knows there's no time to hesitate. He pulls out a healing flower and presses it against Raven's wounds. In an instant, the injuries close up, and Raven is restored as if nothing had happened. Raven recognizes Alan as the same young man he spotted at the Adventurer Guild not long ago and thanks him sincerely for saving his life. Just as Alan turns to leave, the party calls him back, insisting they owe him something for his help. Alan isn't interested in riches or praise, so he simply asks them to collect 100 E-rank magic stones for him. They agree without hesitation and promise to have them ready within a week. After they separate, Alan turns his attention to Hawkins and questions why he flew past the strict 3-kilometer boundary he had set. But when he notices Hawkins' expression, it clicks. The hawk had gone farther because he wanted to help the adventurers in danger. Alan had always assumed his summons were just obedient tools following commands, yet now he understands they have their own will and emotions. Realizing that, he gently pats Hawkins on the head and apologizes for snapping earlier, making it clear he never meant to come down on him so hard. Hawkins accepts it, and the connection between them feels deeper than before. With everything settled, Alan goes right back to his role as a manservant, once again tolerating Lady Cecile using him as a human step stool so she can reach a jar of jam from the highest shelf. He handles it without complaint, continuing to juggle his life of service and adventure with the same steady commitment he always shows. Some time later, the family sits down for lunch, and Zenoff can't hide how impressed he is by how delicious everything tastes. Cecile beams with pride, explaining that the dish was prepared using some of the horned rabbits Alan caught himself. Zenoff praises Alan's ability, though he says it's only natural for the son of a seasoned warrior like Rodden to have that kind of talent. He also brings up that Krina Village successfully fulfilled the annual quota of 20 boars, and Alan is pleased to hear it, even though he never once doubted they'd manage to get it done. Out of nowhere, Thomas wonders aloud why they haven't eaten any boar meat if the quota was completed, especially since it used to be the star of their winter meals, yet they haven't tasted it at all this year. Alan is taken aback by that, but he figures the king must have been the one who ordered the increased quota, meaning all the meat was likely shipped straight to the capital. Then Thomas casually asks Alan if he could hunt a white deer for their next lunch, which immediately causes everyone else to shout at him for making such a ridiculous request. After all, bringing down a white deer is no simple task. Still, to everyone's disbelief, Alan agrees without a second thought. He's been itching for something more exciting lately, and if a white deer is around C rank, then it shouldn't be much trouble for him. The following morning, Alan ventures into the forest, and after carving out a deep pit in the snow, he dashes off to search for a white deer. When he finally finds one, he summons 4 frogs to serve as bait. Activating their provoke skills, the frogs quickly draw the deer's focus, making it charge straight at them. Just before impact, Alan dismisses the frogs and instantly resummons them somewhere else. He repeats this trick several times, steadily guiding the deer exactly where he wants it. In the end, the deer rushes forward and drops straight into the trap he prepared. And now that it's stuck, finishing it off is effortless. About an hour later, chaos breaks out at the mansion when a massive white deer suddenly appears at the front gate. The servants panic and prepare to strike. But just before they move, they hear a voice coming from underneath the beast. A second later, Alan crawls out from beneath it. Taking it down had been simple, and the kill rewarded him with over 2000 XP. But dragging the huge thing all the way back alone was a serious hassle. He tells the servants to fetch Thomas since he hunted this deer specifically for him. Soon after, the whole family rushes outside to see the commotion, and Granvelle is stunned that Alan actually succeeded. Thomas is overjoyed at the thought of enjoying venison for New Year's, while the rest of the family is still trying to process what just happened. Granvelle can't help but question whether Alan is truly talentless, because there's no way an ordinary 8-year-old should be able to defeat a C-rank monster solo. With that in mind, he decides Alan needs to be evaluated again as soon as he can. A short time later, Alan is summoned to a meeting with Sibas, where he's told that he's being elevated to the position of huntsman. With this new role, Alan will be responsible for supplying the household with game and standing guard if monsters ever threaten the estate. In return, he'll be paid 100 silver coins each month, which is double what he earns right now. On paper, it sounds like a sweet deal, but Alan quickly realizes what's really going on. They're trying to avoid paying the full market value for any powerful beasts he brings down. That deer alone was worth more than 100 silver, and handing him a fixed wage is far cheaper than paying for every monster individually. Alan doesn't care too much about missing out on the extra profit as long as he's free to hunt whenever he feels like it. But just as he's about to head out and get started, Sibas stops him. He reminds Alan that he still has his regular responsibilities as Cecile's attendant, meaning he's only permitted to hunt once a week. The news hits hard, and Alan can't hide his disappointment. But complaining would only make him look bad, so he swallows it and accepts the arrangement. Not long after, Alan accompanies Cecile to the harbor to welcome Mihai, who is finally returning home from the academy for a visit. It's the first time Alan has ever seen an airship up close, and he can't help being fascinated by the way it operates. Cecile, on the other hand, couldn't care less about the mechanics, and the moment Mihai steps off, she rushes forward and throws her arms around him, excitedly telling him how much she missed him. She asks why he didn't come back last summer like he promised. Mihai admits he did make that promise, but unforeseen circumstances got in the way, and he sincerely apologizes for letting her down. Alan then steps forward and offers to carry Mihai's luggage, while Cecile introduces him as her personal servant. Mihai comes across as kind and perceptive, and after a single glance at Alan, he recognizes his potential and says so openly. Alan feels relieved that Mihai is level-headed. Dealing with another personality like Cecile's would have been exhausting. Watching the siblings interact so naturally makes him quietly wonder how his own family is doing these days. Later that afternoon, Alan heads out to hunt a few creatures for lunch, and by the time he returns, the kitchen staff are thrilled, praising the freshness and quality of the ingredients and expressing their gratitude for his effort. As he's about to store the meat away, he notices Mihai sparring with Zenoff in the garden. Despite being only 14, Mihai demonstrates impressive skill, especially managing to keep up with someone like Zenoff. Still, the difference in raw power is obvious, and in the end, Mihai is forced to concede defeat. Everyone showers Mihai with praise for how well he performed, but then Cecile spots Alan hauling in his catch for the day, and she immediately compliments him on landing something that impressive. There is no denying it took serious skill to bring down a monster like that, and since they happen to have some spare time, Mihai casually asks Alan if he wants to have a spar as well. Zenoff glances at Granvelle for approval, and when Granvelle shows no objection, Zenoff passes Alan his sword so he can step into the match. Alan is fired up since it is his first time gripping a mithril blade, and it has been forever since he last sparred, so he is more than ready. At the moment, his stats are tuned for hunting, not straight-up combat, but with all the recent level gains stacking up, he is confident his current build can handle it. The match kicks off and Alan starts by pulling his strikes, not wanting to injure Mihai. But the instant their swords collide for the first time, Alan understands something. This guy is no joke. Mihai spent years training and studying at the Royal Academy, and that kind of experience shows the second steel meets steel. So even if Alan matches him in raw power, his technique is still beginner tier at best, meaning he never really had a shot. When the duel wraps up, everyone goes right back to praising Mihai's strength. though Cecile makes sure to commend Alan too since he managed to keep up for a decent stretch. Thomas asks Mihai how he became that strong, and Mihai explains that last summer he was assigned to clear a dungeon as a project, and that ordeal pushed him to a whole different level. Cecile realizes that must be why he could not visit last summer, and she feels a little guilty for not knowing. But Alan is too busy imagining how insane the Academy's training must be. Cecile then asks Mihai if he plans to stay longer, yet unfortunately he has to return to the Academy in a few days and will not be back until next summer. Out of nowhere, Alan asks Mihai to spar with him again the next time he returns, and Mihai agrees without hesitation. He gives Alan a firm handshake and asks him to look after Cecile until then, and Alan has no choice but to accept, though inside he is already calculating the fastest way to escape this dumb responsibility without disgracing his dad. Not long after, Viscount Carnal drops by to see Granvelle, and right away he starts throwing subtle insults about how this place is nothing more than some forgotten countryside dump. Granvelle brushes it off with a laugh, but the tension between them is obvious. These two genuinely can't stand each other. Alan personally brings Carnal his food, and Carnal lights up, convinced he is finally tasting the famous boar meat Gran has supposedly been hoarding. In reality, it is just horned rabbit that Alan hunted himself, and the funny part is that Carnal cannot even tell the difference. The Carnal and Granvelle families have been rivals for centuries. At the moment, the Carnal lands are thriving, while Granvelle's territory is struggling through a serious economic slump. The reason behind it all is White Dragon Mountain, and both territories sit on opposite sides of it. The mountain is rich with mithril, so each side established multiple mines to profit from it. The problem is that the dragon nesting at the summit is currently settled on Granvelle's side, which makes it impossible for them to operate their mines, so that single issue crushed their economy. It has not always been this way though, because the dragon is unpredictable and changes its nesting ground roughly every 100 years. Whenever it switches sides, the balance of power flips completely between the two territories. Eventually, Granvelle asks Carnal what the real reason for his visit is, since he clearly did not travel all this way just to exchange petty remarks. Carnal is so absorbed in his meal that he almost forgets to bring it up. Then he casually mentions that his eldest daughter recently completed her appraisal, and he wanted to personally deliver the news. Alan immediately assumes Carnal's daughter must have awakened some extraordinary talent and that he came here to brag about it. Instead, Carnal announces that his daughter has no talent at all. That alone is strange, but what makes it even more confusing is how Carnal mockingly reminds Granvelle that 2 of his 3 children possess talents. Granvelle snaps back, pointing out that Carnal also has an older son with talent, which means both families still have heirs who must shoulder a noble's responsibilities someday. After that tense exchange, Carnal leaves, and Alan is left completely puzzled about what the entire conversation was supposed to accomplish, though he does come to realize that noble life is far less glamorous than he once imagined. Later on, during one of his free days, Alan meets up with the party he previously assisted. He asks for their guidance because he is considering taking on a few C-rank monsters. He has already wiped out more than 10,000 goblins in the forest, and grinding D-rank creatures is no longer challenging. The group cautions him that C-rank monsters are on a completely different level and far more dangerous than what he is used to. Alan understands the risk, which is exactly why he wants to gather as much knowledge as possible from them before heading into his next serious hunt. A little while later, Alan is roaming through the woods when one of his birds notices a C-rank beast and immediately flies over to alert him. Alan heads out to check it out and discovers an orc dozing beneath a tree. It's the perfect chance to strike, so he unleashes a swarm of tigers and ambushes the orc without hesitation. The orc attempts to resist, but Alan has far too many summons for it to handle, and before long, it collapses. After finishing it off, Alan cuts into the corpse to extract the magic stone. He feels genuinely satisfied for defeating a C-rank monster without setting up a trap beforehand. Still, he quickly reminds himself to stay grounded, because he's nowhere near strong enough to defeat Mihai yet, and getting cocky would be a stupid mistake. Right then, one of his birds signals that another C-rank monster is close by, and this one turns out to be an armored ant. Alan hesitates for a moment since he remembers Raven nearly losing his life to one of those things, but there's no turning back now because the ant has already locked onto him. With no other option, Alan sends in his tigers, yet their claws can't break through the creature's thick shell, forcing him to come up with another plan. He decides to use his butterfly summons to try and put it to sleep. Once the ant flips onto its back, Alan leaps onto its underside and attempts to stab it. But even with his attack power exceeding 400, his blade refuses to pierce through. The ant begins to stir, and Alan panics, repeatedly driving his knife down until he finally cracks the armor and puts it down for good. He's relieved it's over, though it bothers him that despite both being C rank, the ant demanded far more effort than the orc because it's nearly resistant to physical damage. He can't help but think that magic might have made the fight easier, and then it hits him that his intelligence stat is incredibly high, which means maybe he could actually cast spells. To test that theory, he asks Cecile if he can sit in on her magic lesson. During class, he questions the instructor about whether he has the potential to use magic. The teacher produces a magic orb and explains that it will glow if he possesses any magical aptitude. Alan concentrates with everything he's got, but the orb stays dark no matter what he does. He's forced to accept that he has zero magical talent, and it hits him harder than he expected. Seeing how crushed he looks, Cecile feels sorry for him and hands him a cookie, hoping it might lift his spirits. That concludes this episode. Thank you for watching. If you want to see the next part, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell.